In this video, I'm going to show you some very useful but simple retouching techniques. Also some techniques I use to remove objects from a photo. Alright, so this photo is not a bad photo, but there are definitely some things that I would fix in this picture to make it less distracting and more about the client in the middle. Obviously the power pole's in the back, and then there's this really tall power pole. There's a dark spot over here on the left. The grass is a little distracting. Now, I didn't make this dead spot for all of our Texans out there. It was already there, so not my fault. Now, I probably should have shot a little lower so that it would be less noticeable because it is a bit distracting. But let's get on with removing some of these distracting things from the scene. So I'm going to hit Z for the zoom tool and click and zoom onto these power lines over here. So there's three ways to remove these. You could use the healing tool, which is J, and simply paint over each power line, which does a really good job. You could also use the clone stamp tool to copy from over here and paint it over here. Or you could use the patch healing tool. Right now I'm just using the spot healing brush, which is great about 90% of the time, but it does leave some artifacts sometimes, as you just saw me kind of cleaning up the area. That one was pretty clean. Starting down here and going all the way up. Get those little side brackets. Cool, so not bad, although it left a little artifact here. So I'm going to paint over it. Now sometimes you start fighting the brush. It does, half the job and it leaves some artifacts. So I do find myself going through and fixing that up. Another way to do it would be using the patch healing tool. So go to Polygon Select, and I'm just going to draw over this power line, and I'm on a Windows, so I'm going to hit Shift F5. I'm not sure if it's the same on a Mac, and make sure that Content Aware is selected. Okay, so it did a good job on the top part, but not so much on the bottom half. There's still the power pole there, which I could then use a clone stamp tool, sampling from this edge, painting on top. Problem solved, right? Let's see how it does in the other power poles. Again, Polygon Select to make a rough selection. Hitting Enter to close it, and then Shift F5, Content Aware Fill. Here it is. It was on my other screen. And that one didn't do too good of a job. So it looks like Content Aware Fill is not the tool for the job in this situation. In other circumstances, it's the only tool for the job, and it's amazing. And it's really a magical tool sometimes, but not all the time. All right, so it looks like our healing brush and our clone stamping is the way to go. I'm going to clone stamp the rest of these out of here to show you the alternate way to do it. That looks great. Make sure there's enough variety so it looks believable, and that you're lining up all the sharp edges so that they match and there's no jump or break in this tree line. And to make sure you're matching your color areas, this is a bright green because over here is bright green as well. Down into the tan. Make sure it's all just kind of makes sense. And you got to get some variety in there sometimes too. You can use opacity, like 50% opacity, to kind of brush, half and half, just to give it a little more realistic look. And that looks great. All right, we've got this very blurry, big power structure over here. And let's try, I'm just going to use a healing brush because I just know off the bat it's just going to be super fast. Oh, I'm still at 50% opacity, so I'm going to hit 0 to go to full opacity. Painting in some rough circles. Awesome. It's gone. There's this weird dark spot over here. Hopefully it's not a Sasquatch. I'm going to hit J for healing. Let's see how the spot healing brush does. Not too bad. It's kind of blurry. Let's try the clone stamp tool, which is S. Not bad. Looks nice and not distracting. There's another little black blob over here. Kind of clone stamp that in. Make sure the values are roughly matching. There we go, a little bit of opacity. All right, good. I'm happy with that. Now we've got some stray hairs. For this job, I would use the clone stamping tool because I'm obviously going to be grabbing from this, kind of dead grass color, moving it over to the right and just making it nice and clean. I'm going to do this part in 2 steps. So the first step is to erase the big hairs, and then the second step is to get nice and sharp along the edges to make it clean. So this is the first messy, big step. We're not getting too close to the face because our brush size is large and it won't look good. All right, now the second step is to shrink down our brush, maybe even make it a little bit harder so it hugs along these edges of her face or her hair. Make sure that you're getting the same level horizontally. So I'm copying from right here, and if I'm copying from here, I don't want to start painting up here because see, that doesn't match. Or if I go up high and start painting low, it also doesn't match. So start at the same horizontal level, at least in this photo. That's what makes sense to do. Other photos might be a little different. Now some of you might be saying, you know, leave the stray hairs. It's natural, right? She's a kid. You can't have perfect hair. Well, you're not wrong. But I like to have my photos most of the time as clean as possible so that I'm doing nothing but focusing on my client and the memory and the moment. And honestly, sometimes, not always, sometimes stray hairs distract me a little bit. So therefore, I'm going to remove them. There. Not too bad. Now I could clean up this little ridge here. There's, you can see the hairs going and then they disappear off the edge. But I'm not going to take time to do that in this video. Just kind of want this to be sort of an introduction to cloning and healing and spot removal. All right, she's got some bangs that, again, visually distract me from her face. So, and it should be an easy job to remove it for the healing tool, which is my favorite tool to use for removing stray hairs. So make sure that your brush is bigger than the hair that you're removing. I had to do a second step there to kind of clean it up. Awesome. And I'm going to leave this bang here. That's okay. Plus, that would be really hard to remove. And it doesn't distract me so much from her face. Great. That's pretty good. Now we got another spot down here. And I could probably use the clone stamp tool, sampling at a bright area of her shin because this area is also bright. Skin tones are tough when you're using clone stamp because if they don't match up, it looks really obvious. But I got pretty lucky with that one. That one looked pretty natural. She's got a little dark spot here as well, so I'm going to sample right here. Paint, yeah, that looked okay. The healing tool is also really good for skin because it will kind of make up for the differences in value in skin, and it will retain the texture. It doesn't smooth it. It's just grabbing from the surrounding areas and filling it in, if you will, kind of like the patch healing tool. Cool, that looks great. My last thing that I would like to do is add a little brightness to her eyes because they're just a little dark and shadowy. His eyes are okay, and yeah, so I'm going to make a curves adjustment layer over here, making sure that the mask is selected, which is this white square. I'm going to hit Control I, or on a Mac, Command I, and now I'm going to go to Brush Tool, B on my keyboard, right click, and make my brush about the size of her eye. And I'm going to make my opacity 50%, which you can hit 5 on your keyboard, or you can go up here and drag and whatever, type in 50%. All right, so I'm painting white on this mask. Oh, let's go to the adjustment layer here. If you don't see this panel on the top right, you need to go to Windows and Properties, and this should pop up. So I'm going to make this bright. There we go. Now you don't see any change happening on my photo because the mask is black. But when we paint white in, watch what happens. The curve is visible. Nice. So I'm using a low opacity. I went down to 30 here. Just going to paint a little spot on his mouth and his eyes to make them pop out a little bit more. Kind of to bring them back into the photo. A little bit on her forehead. Cool. That's all it needs. Not too much. Just a little bump in the brightness. And the great thing about this technique is you can turn it down. It's all adjustable, which I love. Nothing but a clean, non-distracting portrait. Now, the last thing that I would do to this photo is I can actually grab the color of this dead grass down here, or dead bluebonnet, and kind of make it greener so it doesn't stand out so much because that visually distracts me. Like, I look at them and I'm like, oh, cute. And then I say, oh, beautiful bluebonnets. And then lastly, oh, the dead grass. So let's make an adjustment layer of color balance. Let's grab the highlight section and let's make it green. Take away some yellow, add some cyan. Next, I'll go to my midtone section. Also add a little bit of green. There we go, maybe a little yellow. Now you notice our photo looks awful because this color balance is adjusting the entire image. That's not what we want. Now we're going to do what we did earlier, where we're going to invert this mask. So I'm going to single click on the mask, Control I or Command I on Mac, and we're going to paint it back in. So B for brush, make sure that your color is white over here. You can hit D to make your colors black and white, and then X to flip-flop your colors. All right, so I'm going to size my brush up, and I'm going to paint white over the dead grass. And my brush is now 100%. There we go. So this probably looks too much, which is okay. We can totally adjust it after we painted this section. So you just want to paint over any yellow dead grass spots in between their legs right there. Nice. All right, cool. So this is before and after. It's a little too much green. So click on the icon of color balance. It brings us back up, and we can play with it. We can adjust how much green we want to add so that it's not such a stark contrast to the flowers, which are very green. And then we've got this, dead yellow grass, just as a little striking. And I'm going to turn the brightness down on that grass area because it's just a little bright. It was reflective. It grabbed a lot of the light and reflected it back to the camera. So I'm going to lastly make a curves adjustment layer. I'm going to hold Alt on Windows. I think it's Option on Mac. Click and drag the mask up, and it just copied the mask. So I have got the same mask for the grass right here. I'm going to select my curves, and I'm going to drag it down. Look at that. We've got total control over the brightness of the grass. Don't make it too dark because then it looks ugly. But I'm just going to tone it down and maybe grab some of the highlights. Drag them down a little bit. All right, so before and after. Cool. It's a little less. It grabs my eye a little bit less now. All right, let's look at a before and after. So this is before, after. Much cleaner, and it really only took me about 5 to 10 minutes to do all this for this photo. Totally worth it in my opinion. I'd love to know what you guys have done to clean up photos and what techniques you like to use for jobs like this. Thanks for watching.